everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to WHIMS. And today I'm going to be giving you an alternative options video on the film SaltBurn. And for this particular series, I basically look at popular TV shows and films and I give you basically my alternative take or give you alternative options, hence the title, for that particular film. So it's kind of like the Asylum knockoffs, but except if they're good. Or accept the better, or sort of like a good version or a good sort of, alternative if you have an itch for, say, for example, a show like The Boys. I recommended the show, the film and the graphic novel Watchmen by Alan Moore. And for my alternative options on the film Descent, I chose the film Deathline, aka Raw Meat if you're in the United States. So I've basically been giving you alternative options, but I do plan on doing reviews for those particular TV shows and films in the future. But for now, I'm just giving you alternative options, and hence I will be doing a video on Saltburn, but that will be coming in due course, as well as my top 10 list of favourite video games. So that will be coming up soon in the future, so look forward to that. But for now, we're going to be talking about a book called The Go-Between by L.P Hartley. And The Go-Between tells the story of Leo, who, when we first meet him, he is effectively 12 years old and he has just moved to a boarding school where he actually develops quite a fascination with doing magic, like doing magic tricks, doing card tricks, doing all sorts of different things. He's fascinated with astrology and the constellations. And he's also quite fascinated with how to affect people. Like he can put, magic spells on people. He feels like he can affect the course of history and the course of people's fates. So he feels like he has a hand, or he's kind of like puppeteering people to do things for him. So he kind of has this feeling that he's sort of like a controller or a puppet master in making sure all these events happen the way he wants them to, because he's a child and he doesn't know any better. So when he is at this boarding school, he befriends a boy who they really hit it off with, but he's actually quite wealthy and upper class. He lives with his family in a manor house called Brandham Hill, and he goes there every summer with his friends. That's basically his family home, and he invites Leo to go and stay there for at least a few days, because Leo's home life isn't very good, unfortunately. He has a father who abandoned him when he was a child, or I think he died, actually. I can't actually remember the details, but apparently he died. And his mother is basically a single parent. And you need to remember this detail for much later on, because it does actually play a role into the themes of the book. And what actually happens while he's at Brandham Hall is he starts to really hit it off with the rich family. Everyone loves him, everyone's very welcoming to him. But because he's of a much more lower class than the people that he's actually in the company of, he kind of feels very kind of put out, and he feels kind of nervous all the time. Like he feels very much, it's almost like a culture shock thing, or a fish out of water sensation that he's feeling, where he feels like he doesn't feel very comfortable having to have servants change his clothes, change his bed sheets. He's very much used to doing that all by himself. So when he first comes into this world, he feels very much, taken aback and rather shocked by it. But then Leo becomes quite a favourite among the people of the family. So when he ends up getting involved in a cricket match, the groundskeeper by the name of Ted Burgess asks him, while he's in the field, to deliver a letter to Lady Marian, who is the child of one of the Marian counts or lords, who he wants to deliver a letter to her so that he can do it for various discreet reasons. But what's very interesting is Leo doesn't know what these letters contain. He basically is asked to deliver them and ask no questions. So when he does deliver the letter, Marian is very excited and rather surprised that Ted Burgess has written to her. But because Leo thinks, because he's just 12 years old, he doesn't know that what's actually going on is actually something much more shocking and much more scandalous than what's actually going on in the story. So it's actually really quite fascinating what manages to unravel, because what the title basically suggests is that Leo is the go-between character. He's the go-between character between these two people, who we later find out are having an affair. But what's very interesting is it's not simply a case of, what I really love about this novel is there are no villains. There are no villainous characters. There's no villainous people. It's like Succession, but if everyone was just a very nice person. That's effectively what this is. It feels like you don't want to see these characters fall apart. You don't want to see these characters come under any harm or any heartache, because they're written so well and they're written with such a human quality. And I really like that about this book, and I really like the fact that this book basically decides to tell this kind of story that if we were in a Bronte novel or a Jane Austen novel, or sort of like a Brideshead Revisited or a Downton Abbey sort of thing, he would be a bit part player. Leo would be the character who sort of just shows up, says, "Oh, you've got a package for you, sir," or something like that. And they'll say, "Go on then, off you pop," or whatever, or "Thank you," and then just wave them away. But Leo, because he's the main character, not just the main character, but the main narrator, we do get a very interesting insight into his psychology. And this is where I feel L.P Hartley as a novelist shines, because he really does a very good job of really highlighting the inner landscape, the inner, psychology of an individual. He pretty much is the sort of predecessor to novelists like Stephen King, Ruth Rendell, in the sense that they're able to go really inside the character's own thoughts and in their own imaginations, to the point where you can actually see and feel what they're thinking. And it really is quite a very interesting style. And it feels like almost L.P Hartley perfected it, because this book was published in 1957, but it's actually about 1917, sort of like the early 1900s. So it's a very interesting story on that regard, about how he pretty much perceives this relationship. But what actually happens is, when Leo is quite curious one day, he looks at one of the letters that Marian gives him, and when he peeks at one of the letters, he realises that it's actually Marian who's actually supposed to be... It's a declaration of love by Marian to Ted Burgess, who's his farmhand, and she's this, she's of upper class, she's very, noble and destined for great things. But she's also marrying, engaged or promised to be married to a lord who's also a very nice guy. He served in the war, he served in the war, and he did all these other things. And he's just a genuinely nice guy. So when it's actually revealed that this affair is actually happening, it's genuinely heartbreaking on both sides, because you really do, like Leo, you learn to love both the characters of Ted Burgess, Marian, and this Lord character, who she's actually, Lord Billingham, I think his name is. And he really, and they all really are wonderfully well-drawn characters. But you also care about Leo, because you're really caring about what's going to happen to him if this affair gets revealed. So it's not so much of when is this, or it's not so much a case of if this affair gets revealed. It's all a matter of when, because like any old soap opera, eventually the actual affair does come to light and the cat is out of the bag. So it's more a matter of when will this happen? When will the affair unravel? And it's actually a really heartbreaking story, but it's a very well written story, and it's a very powerful story that discusses a very difficult topic, because this was again set in the 1900s, which is when Sigmund Freud first came onto the scene about psychoanalysis and the interpretation of dreams and the Oedipus complex and all these other things to do with sexuality and talk of sex, which is when, back in those days, back in the 1900s, sex wasn't talked about like it is now, because we take the discussion of sex and sexuality for granted. Lots of people are talking about it, lots of people are talking about it publicly. Back in the 1900s, people didn't talk about that, and usually it was often reserved. When it came to sexuality, people often left it for behind closed doors. That was usually between two people, and that was usually where it ended. It never was talked about in the open, whereas because Sigmund Freud came on the scene, it now became a much more open topic. But where this kind of fits into in regards to the go-between is that Leo is a very lonely character. He's a character who's 12 years old when we meet him, and he is a character who's gone through a fair bit of tragedy and hardship in his life. He's lost his father, who died when he was very young, and he never really grew up with a father figure, and he's mostly been raised by his mum in this very kind of working class neighbourhood. So when he actually gets the opportunity to visit a place like Brandham Hall, he really does kind of fall in love with the place, and he falls in love with the people, and he falls in love with the lifestyle that he sort of finds himself in. But what's very interesting is he undergoes a lot of change physically and emotionally, because he starts to fall in love with both Marian and all three of the characters involved in this little love triangle. He falls in love with all three of them because they really are kind of like his family. And it really is quite sad, because there's this really heartbreaking scene in the book, both in the book and in the 1971 film. This scene was very heartbreaking to me because it really did show that Leo is starting to go through puberty in his own way, and he has this conversation with Ted Burgess, who says, "Can you give this letter to Lady Marian?" And he goes, "No, I don't want to give any more letters to Lady Marian." And he goes, "They've told me all about lovers." And he goes, "What do they mean? Are you a lover? What do you know?" And it's a very sad scene. And he actually grabs Ted Burgess by the clothes. He actually pulls him towards him, and I actually really felt sad because he wants to know, because he's a child and he's obviously going through all these emotions, and having it's really uncomfortable to watch because you really do see that, excuse me, my laptop's a bit skew with, but yeah, you really do see the sadness in Leo's eyes when he asks that question. And because Ted Burgess gets angry, he throws him out. He says, "If I ever catch you around here again, God be with you." But what I really think is really sad is that Leo wants to know these things. He sees a father figure in both Ted Burgess and this Lord character who Marian is married to, Lord Billingham. And it really is such a sad story because all he wants is a father figure. All he wants is someone to basically explain to him this very adult thing that's going on, so that when the affair is revealed, it actually really is even more heartbreaking because it happens during a time when it's supposed to be all about him and he's supposed to be embraced by this upper class family. And it really is quite beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful books I've read recently, and I really would highly recommend it. I'd highly recommend you guys read the book. You can get it in any of your local libraries. That's where I got my copy. But I really do love this book, and I really do want to know your thoughts about this book in the comments. And what did you think of this video? Did you enjoy this alternative options take on SaltBurn? And let me know what you think of this video, and let me know what other suggestions you'd like me to talk about for alternative options. Like, what other popular TV shows and films would you like me to do alternative options on for? Because I really do think it's a very interesting exercise for channels like this to have this sort of alternative options feel, because there's all sorts of alternative options that YouTube gives you in its algorithm. So there's all sorts of things that I could do for entertainment quality, like, you know, what sort of films and TV shows or books would you like me to talk about? But yeah, I really did enjoy this book. I would highly recommend people check the book out. And if you want to check out an adaptation of The Go-Between, there's a 1971 adaptation starring Alan Davis and Julie Christie, and that's a really good adaptation. I recently saw that for the first time as well. It's a really good adaptation. It's very sad and very tragic, like the actual book itself, but it's actually a really interesting book. I'd highly recommend people check it out. Please check it out. It's called The Go-Between by L.P Hartley, and that's all I've got for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and let me know what you thought of this novel in the comments, and I hope you're all having a very good day. This has been Joshua WHIMS Industry Musings, or WHIMS. Take care, bye for now.